Hello everyone, and welcome to the ASIS CPP Mastery Series 2026. I am delighted to have you join me as we begin Domain 6 of Physical Security Principles and Practices, an important domain of the CPP body of knowledge. In this domain, we will explore how security professionals protect people, property, information, and operations through effective physical security measures. We will also learn how to assess risks, design controls, implement solutions, and evaluate their effectiveness. So, let's begin our journey into physical security. This module focuses exclusively on physical security, which forms Domain 6 of the CPP certification syllabus. This is part 1 of 5, where we establish the fundamental concepts and management principles before moving into more advanced topics. Our objective is not simply to understand security technologies or physical barriers. We will learn how security professionals use a risk-based approach to determine what needs protection, what threats exist, and what controls are appropriate. Let's begin by understanding the purpose and scope of physical security. Physical security protects the physical environment against threats that could affect people, property, information, or operations. The first area is people, including employees, visitors, contractors, and others within the protected environment. The second is property and assets, including buildings, equipment, vehicles, and other physical resources. The third is information, including sensitive information that may exist in physical or digital form. Finally, we have operations, which include the processes and activities required for the organization to function. For CPP professionals, the objective is to develop security measures that protect these assets while supporting business requirements. Physical security is therefore much more than protecting a building. It protects the people, assets, information, and operations that depend on it. As we begin this domain, it is important to understand how the CPP examination expects you to think. The exam is not simply testing your knowledge of security technology. It tests your ability to apply a structured, risk-driven approach to security decisions. A common mistake is to begin with technology. Instead of asking, which security camera should we install? A security manager should first ask, what are we protecting? What threats and vulnerabilities exist? What are the consequences if protection fails? Only then should we determine the appropriate controls. For the CPP examination, remember, risk drives security. Technology supports the solution. Effective physical security is not a single product or measure. It is a system made up of interdependent components. The first component is people, security officers, employees, visitors, and contractors. The second is processes, including policies, procedures, and response plans. The third is technology, such as CCTV, access control, intrusion detection, and monitoring systems. The fourth is physical measures, including barriers, doors, locks, lighting, and fencing. The key concept is integration. No single security measure is sufficient on its own. Effective protection comes from combining people, processes, technology, and physical measures into a coordinated system. The result is integrated protection, where each element supports the others. Physical security is not a one-time project. It is a continuous management cycle. The process begins by identifying assets and understanding what needs to be protected. Next, we assess risk by identifying threats, vulnerabilities, and potential consequences. Based on the assessment, security professionals design appropriate controls and then implement and improve them through monitoring, testing, and evaluation. This creates a continuous cycle. Identify assets, assess risk, design controls, and implement and improve. As risks and organizational requirements change, the process begins again. For CPP candidates, remember that effective physical security is an ongoing process of assessment, protection, evaluation, and improvement. The ASIS CPP body of knowledge organizes physical security around 3 core tasks. The first is to conduct facility surveys, systematically evaluating the site, its assets, vulnerabilities, and existing security controls. The second is to select, implement, and manage security strategies, ensuring that appropriate countermeasures are designed and deployed to address identified risks. The third is to assess effectiveness by testing, monitoring, and reviewing security measures to determine whether they are actually reducing risk. These three tasks provide the framework for the physical security concepts we will explore throughout this domain. We now begin the first major section, physical security assessment. A rigorous and systematic assessment is the essential first step before designing or implementing any security program. It allows security professionals to understand the current physical security status of a facility, identify weaknesses, and determine where improvements may be required. The quality of the assessment directly influences the quality of the security decisions that follow.
The quality of the assessment directly influences the quality of the security decisions that follow.
A facility survey is a structured process used to determine the current state of physical security at a site. It begins with reviewing existing documentation and conducting on-site observations to understand what actually exists and how security measures operate in practice. A survey examines areas such as current security conditions, existing protection measures, vulnerabilities, threats, operational requirements, and opportunities for improvement. Typical inputs include documents and drawings, site observations, stakeholder interviews, security records, existing system documentation, and maintenance records. For CPP professionals, the facility survey provides the factual foundation for making informed security decisions. Several techniques can be used to conduct an effective facility survey. Document review examines policies, procedures, previous assessments, and security records. On-site inspection allows us to observe actual conditions rather than relying only on documentation. Stakeholder interviews provide insight from people who understand the facility, its operations, and existing security practices. Checklists help ensure that important areas are consistently examined. System testing verifies whether security controls actually function as intended. Finally, historical analysis reviews previous incidents and identified vulnerabilities to understand recurring risks and security weaknesses. Using multiple techniques provides a more complete picture of the facility's security condition. Documentation provides the foundation for understanding what should exist before we evaluate what actually exists. Important documents may include building and floor plans, security system drawings, access control diagrams, CCTV and IDs layouts, emergency plans, asset registers, security procedures, previous risk assessments, and incident reports. These records help establish the intended security design and provide a baseline for the assessment. However, there is an important CPP distinction. Documentation tells you what should exist. The site survey tells you what actually exists. Both are necessary because neither documentation nor observation alone provides a complete picture. Before risks can be assessed, we must clearly define what requires protection. Physical security assessments typically consider four major asset categories. People include employees, visitors, contractors, executives, and customers. Physical assets include facilities, equipment, vehicles, inventory, and critical infrastructure components. Information includes documents, records, electronic media, and physical information assets requiring controlled access. Finally, operations include processes, services, equipment, and critical business activities that must remain functional. Identifying these assets is essential because effective security begins with understanding what we are protecting and why it matters. Not every asset requires the same level of protection. Once assets are identified, security professionals must determine their criticality by considering several factors. Mission criticality asks how essential the asset is to organizational operations. Operational impact considers what happens if the asset becomes unavailable or compromised. We also consider financial impact, safety impact, and reputational impact. Finally, recovery requirements determine how quickly the asset or function must be restored after a disruption. Understanding asset criticality helps security professionals prioritize protection where it matters most. A threat is any potential event or actor that could cause harm to an asset. Effective threat identification requires looking beyond obvious security concerns and considering the full range of possible threats. External threats may include burglary, trespass, vandalism, theft, sabotage, terrorism, civil unrest, and vehicle attacks. Internal threats include insider theft, sabotage, unauthorized access, workplace violence, and information theft. We must also consider environmental threats such as fire, flood, severe weather, earthquakes, utility failures, and natural or infrastructure disruptions. The key question is, who or what could cause harm to the asset, and how? Once threats have been identified, the next step is to determine whether the facility may be vulnerable. A vulnerability is a weakness that can be exploited by a threat to increase the likelihood of harm. Common vulnerabilities include uncontrolled access, where barriers or access controls are inadequate. Inadequate detection occurs when intrusion detection, alarms, or monitoring systems cannot reliably identify an incident. Single points of failure exist when a critical security function has no effective redundancy. Finally, delayed response occurs when security personnel or response capabilities cannot react quickly enough. The key question is, how could the threat succeed under current conditions? Risk can be understood through three key elements: threat, vulnerability, and consequence. First, we identify the threat. What could cause harm? Second, we evaluate the vulnerability, how that threat could exploit an existing weakness. Third, we consider the consequence, what impact would result if the event occurred. High-risk situations require greater protection priority, allowing organizations to allocate resources and apply stronger controls where they are most needed. Lower-risk situations call for proportionate controls, avoiding unnecessary protection or over-engineering. For the CPP examination, remember, risk assessment helps determine where security resources should be focused.
Remember, risk assessment helps determine where security resources should be focused.
Gap analysis bridges the difference between the current security state and the desired level of protection. The process begins by identifying the current state and then defining the required state. The difference between these two represents the gap that must be addressed. Common gaps may include a missing control, an underperforming system, an inadequate procedure, or poor integration between existing security measures. The objective is not simply to identify problems, but to determine the corrective actions needed to close those gaps. For CPP professionals, gap analysis provides a practical link between risk assessment and security improvement. We now move into physical protection principles. Understanding these fundamental principles is essential for the CPP examination because they guide decisions throughout the physical security program. These principles help security professionals determine how protection should be designed and implemented, from perimeter barriers to response protocols. As we continue, we will examine how these principles work together to create layered protection and strengthen the overall security posture of a facility. We now come to one of the most important frameworks in physical security, the 5Ds. The 5Ds describe how security measures work together to protect an asset. The first is deter, which discourages an adversary from attempting an attack. The second is detect, which identifies a threat or unauthorized activity as early as possible. The third is deny, which prevents or restricts unauthorized access. The fourth is delay, which slows an adversary and provides additional time for response. Finally, defend represents the organization's ability to respond and protect the asset once a threat is detected. For CPP candidates, remember that the 5Ds work together as an integrated security strategy, not as independent measures. The first of the 5Ds is deterrence. Deterrence is primarily psychological. It does not physically stop an attack. Instead, it attempts to convince a potential adversary that the likelihood of success is low and the risk of being detected or apprehended is high. Visible security measures such as security officers and patrols, prominent fencing and signage, security lighting, access control systems, and visible alarms or monitoring indicators can contribute to deterrence. For the CPP examination, remember that deterrence is about influencing the adversary's decision before an incident occurs. The objective is to make the potential consequences appear greater than the expected benefit. The second D is detection. Detection is the ability to identify unauthorized activity, suspicious behavior, or security breaches early enough to support an effective response. Common detection measures include CCTV and video analytics, intrusion detection systems, security officers, and access control alarms. Each of these measures can provide information that helps security personnel recognize a potential incident. However, detection by itself does not provide security. The critical requirement is that detection must lead to assessment and response. An alarm has little security value if nobody receives it, evaluates it, or takes appropriate action. The third D is delay. Delay creates a time buffer between detection and an adversary successfully reaching the protected asset. The objective is to slow the adversary long enough for security personnel or other response forces to intervene. Common delay measures include reinforced doors, high-security locks, perimeter fencing, bollards and vehicle barriers, protective glazing, and compartmentation of interior areas. The critical principle is simple. Delay time must exceed the required response time. If an adversary can reach the asset before responders arrive, the delay measures have not provided effective protection. The fourth concept we examine is defend, which represents the organization's capability to respond to a detected and delayed threat. Effective defense depends on having trained personnel, established procedures, and appropriate coordination. Security officers provide trained personnel capable of responding to incidents and managing access. A security operations center provides centralized monitoring and coordination of security responses. Law enforcement coordination establishes relationships and protocols for situations requiring external assistance. And emergency procedures provide documented and practiced response protocols for known threats and incidents. The critical relationship is detection plus delay plus response increases the probability of successful intervention. Physical security becomes stronger when protection is organized into multiple layers. This concept is known as defense in depth. Instead of relying on a single security measure, multiple layers are established from the outer perimeter toward the critical asset. An adversary may first encounter the outer perimeter, followed by additional site, building, interior, and critical asset protection layers. Each layer provides an opportunity to deter, detect, deny, delay, and support response. The objective is to create multiple opportunities to stop or interrupt an adversary before they reach the protected asset. For CPP candidates, remember, layered protection is stronger than relying on a single security measure. Effective protection combines different categories of security controls, with each addressing a different dimension of risk. Physical controls include barriers, doors, locks, bollards, and protective construction. Technical controls include CCTV, intrusion detection, access control, and monitoring systems. Human controls include security officers, supervision, patrols, and observation. And procedural controls include policies, inspections, response protocols, and operational procedures. The objective is to create multiple complementary controls so that if one control fails, others can help prevent, detect, or respond to a security incident. We now move into access control, a foundational function of physical security. Access control determines who is permitted to be where, when, and under what conditions. It controls movement into facilities and restricted areas while helping protect people, property, information, and operations. Effective access control also provides an audit trail, allowing organizations to verify access activity and support investigations or compliance requirements. The objective is not simply to keep people out, but to ensure that authorized people receive appropriate access under controlled conditions. Access control involves 5 basic functions. First is identification, establishing who is requesting access. Second is authentication, verifying that the individual is who they claim to be. Third is authorization, determining whether that person is permitted to access the requested area. Fourth is permit or deny, where access is either granted or refused based on the authorization decision. Finally, record means logging the access activity for accountability, investigation, and verification. For CPP candidates, remember this sequence. identify, authenticate, authorize, permit or deny, and record. Authentication verifies that an individual is who they claim to be. There are three primary authentication factors. Something you have includes cards, badges, tokens, or other physical credentials. Something you know includes pins, passwords, or codes. And something you are uses biometrics such as fingerprints, facial recognition, or iris recognition. Stronger security can be achieved by combining multiple factors known as multi-factor authentication or MFA. The appropriate authentication strength should be based on the level of risk associated with a protected asset or area. Visitors, vendors, contractors, and service personnel can create significant access control challenges because they require legitimate access but should not receive unrestricted access. Organizations should establish controls such as identification and authorization at entry, escort requirements, temporary credentials, check-in and check-out procedures, and credential recovery. Additional measures may include vehicle and parking controls, package inspection, activity monitoring, and credential accountability. The key principle is, third parties should receive only the access required for their legitimate business purpose, not blanket access to the facility. We now begin the physical security technology section. Technology is an important enabler of physical security, but it is not the end itself. Security technologies can support detection, access control, monitoring, communication, and response. However, technology decisions should always be based on a defined security requirement and the risks identified through assessment. For CPP professionals, remember that effective physical security is not about selecting the most advanced technology. It is about selecting the right technology to support the security objective. CCTV and video surveillance support multiple physical security functions throughout the incident life cycle, from deterrence and detection to evidence collection. Primary functions include detecting unauthorized activity, assessing alarms, providing real-time monitoring, verifying access control events, and supporting investigations and evidence collection. When designing a CCTV system, security professionals must consider coverage, field of view, lighting conditions, camera location, resolution, storage requirements, privacy requirements, and regulatory compliance. For CPP candidates, remember, a camera that cannot produce useful, actionable information when needed is not an effective security control. Intrusion detection systems, or IDs, provide automated detection of unauthorized access, perimeter breaches, and tampering. They may detect events such as unauthorized entry, perimeter intrusion, door or window opening, interior movement, and tampering with protected equipment. An effective system also requires supporting components, including sensors, communication paths, alarm processing, central monitoring, and response protocols. The critical principle is simple. Detection without a timely and appropriate response provides limited security value. An alarm must ultimately lead to assessment and action. Security lighting is one of the most cost-effective physical security controls. It supports deterrence, detection, surveillance, and officer safety. Visible, well-designed lighting can discourage inappropriate activity and make unauthorized behavior easier to detect. Good illumination also helps security personnel identify potential threats, while appropriate lighting improves CCTV image quality and analytical accuracy. Security lighting can also support emergency response, while backup power helps ensure critical lighting remains available during power failures. For CPP professionals, lighting should be considered as part of the overall security system, not simply as general facility illumination. Perimeter protection creates physical distance and delay between a threat and a protected asset. Passive measures include perimeter fencing, walls, security gates and doors, bollards, fixed barriers, and appropriate standoff distance. Active measures may include crash-rated vehicle barriers, automated access control gates, perimeter intrusion detection, CCTV, and security officer patrols. The objective is to create distance, delay, detection, and controlled access at every point where an adversary could attempt entry. For CPP candidates, perimeter protection should be viewed as the first layer of a broader defense-in-depth strategy.
For CPP candidates, perimeter protection should be viewed as the first layer of a broader defense
Screening controls are used to detect weapons, explosives, contraband, or prohibited items before they enter a protected facility. Metal detection may be used for personal screening, while X-ray screening can examine parcels and packages for concealed items. Canine detection uses trained dogs to identify explosives, narcotics, or other specific threats. Vehicle inspection may include checking undercarriages, vehicle search protocols, and screening at entry points. The CPP principle is important. Select screening methods based on the specific threat, target, environment, and operational requirements, not as a default measure. Emergency notification systems deliver timely, accurate, and actionable information to building occupants and response personnel during security incidents or emergencies. Systems may include mass notification systems, public address and intercom systems, two-way emergency communication, emergency text messaging, visual notification, and integrated alarm notification. Their effectiveness depends on several factors, including comprehensive coverage, reliability and redundancy, message clarity, regular testing and maintenance, and user familiarity. An emergency notification system is valuable only when people can receive, understand, and act on the information provided. For CPP candidates, emergency notification is an important part of the overall physical security and emergency response capability. Effective security requires information to move rapidly from detection to decision and then to response. Security communications may include radio systems, telephone and intercom systems, emergency communications, and digital communication platforms. Monitoring capabilities include security operations centers, control room operations, and alarm and video consoles. The objective is simple. Move information quickly and accurately from detection to decision to response without unnecessary breaks in the communication chain. For CPP professionals, communications and monitoring should be viewed as essential components of an integrated security system. Security systems are only reliable when the power infrastructure supporting them remains available. Utility power provides the primary source, while UPS systems provide immediate backup during short interruptions. Batteries provide short-term power for critical devices and alarm systems, while generators can provide longer-duration backup during extended outages. Organizations may also consider alternative power sources for mission-critical applications. The key principle is, critical security systems must remain functional when normal infrastructure fails. Power continuity should therefore be considered during physical security planning and design. This matrix provides a quick reference for understanding the primary functions supported by common physical security technologies. For example, CCTV can support detection, assessment, investigation, and deterrence. Intrusion detection systems primarily support detection, while fencing and perimeter sensors can contribute to deterrence, delay, and detection. Access control systems support deterrence, denial, and access management, while security lighting supports deterrence and detection. Other technologies, including vehicle barriers, screening systems, communications, emergency notification, and backup power, support functions such as delay, denial, response, coordination, and continuity. For CPP candidates, understand the security function each technology supports, rather than simply memorizing the technology itself. We now begin the physical security design section. Security design translates identified risks into performance requirements and technical specifications. Good design creates the bridge between the security assessment and the actual implementation of security measures. The objective is to ensure that security controls are designed around identified risks and operational requirements rather than selected in isolation. As we continue, we will examine how security requirements are translated into practical system designs. The physical security design process begins with risk. Risk is translated into security requirements, which define what the security system must accomplish. These requirements become performance requirements, establishing measurable expectations for the system. The next step is system design, where appropriate technologies and controls are selected and integrated. Finally, these decisions are documented through technical specifications that guide implementation. Good design must also consider factors such as asset criticality, operational requirements, budget constraints, technology capabilities, maintenance needs, and future scalability. For CPP candidates, remember that effective design begins with risk and requirements, not with a specific technology. Integrated security systems allow different security technologies and functions to share information and work together. For example, access control and CCTV can work together so that access events can be associated with video activity. Intrusion detection and CCTV can trigger cameras to display or record activity when an alarm occurs. Alarm and communication systems can support coordinated notification and response. And visitor management and access control can ensure that approved visitors receive appropriate access only during authorized periods. The objective is coordinated security operations. Integration transforms individual security components into a more effective overall system by allowing information to move between technologies and supporting faster, better informed responses. Documentation is not simply an administrative requirement. It provides the foundation for verifying that security systems were designed correctly, built as intended, and can be properly maintained. Security documentation may include site plans and floor plans, security system drawings, technical specifications, equipment schedules, cable and device layouts, integration diagrams, testing requirements, and operating procedures. Good documentation helps ensure that installations can be inspected, performance can be tested, changes can be reviewed, maintenance can be planned, and future upgrades can be managed. For CPP candidates, remember, if the requirement is not clearly documented, it becomes difficult to verify performance or hold anyone accountable. Physical security projects require structured management to ensure that the final solution meets its intended security objectives. First, define the scope, including all security systems and specified features. Next, establish a schedule with clear milestones and completion dates. The budget must account for equipment, labor, and contingency resources. Finally, quality must ensure that the completed solution meets the required performance standards. Effective project management keeps security requirements, resources, timelines, and quality aligned throughout implementation. For CPP professionals, the objective is not simply to complete a project. It is to deliver a security solution that meets its intended requirements. Security spending must be justified against the risk it is intended to address. A cost-benefit analysis compares the expected value of risk reduction with the total cost of achieving it. Security benefits may include lower probability of loss, reduced financial exposure, operational resilience, regulatory compliance, and protection of organizational reputation. However, the decision must also consider the total cost of ownership, including equipment and installation, labor, training, ongoing maintenance, and eventual technology replacement. The key question is, does the proposed measure provide proportionate value relative to the specific risk being addressed? We now move into implementation, from design to reality. Implementation converts the security design into a functioning, integrated security system. This stage requires disciplined project management, rigorous quality control, and systematic testing before the solution is accepted. A well-designed system can still fail if it is poorly installed, configured, or tested. Therefore, implementation must ensure that the final installation performs according to the requirements established during the design process. Procurement is the formal process of acquiring the security systems, equipment, and services defined during design. Key procurement activities include defining the scope of work, developing technical specifications, preparing bid packages, conducting pre-bid site visits, receiving and evaluating proposals, and selecting suppliers. A complete bid package should clearly identify the scope of work, technical specifications, project schedule, cost and payment terms, personnel qualifications, and required documentation deliverables. Well-structured procurement helps ensure competitive, qualified responses and reduces the risk of receiving solutions that do not meet the organization's security requirements. Selecting a security vendor requires evaluating more than price. Technical capability determines whether the vendor can deliver the required solution. Relevant experience demonstrates the ability to successfully complete similar projects. Financial stability helps ensure the organization can rely on the vendor throughout the project. We should also evaluate service and maintenance capability, cybersecurity practices, and life cycle costs. For CPP professionals, remember that the best vendor is not necessarily the lowest cost vendor. The objective is to select a supplier that provides the right combination of technical capability, reliability, support, cybersecurity, and life cycle value. Installation is not the end of the process. It is the beginning of the verification phase. First, we must verify the installation by confirming that device locations, cable runs, and configurations match the approved design. Next, we confirm system integration to ensure that connected systems communicate correctly and that alarms, access control, CCTV, and monitoring functions work together. We must also update documentation so that as-built drawings and system records accurately reflect the final installation. Finally, security personnel must be trained to operate and respond to the installed systems. For CPP candidates, remember, never assume an installation is complete until it has been verified, tested, and confirmed. Testing and commissioning is the formal process of verifying that an installed security system meets its defined requirements before it is accepted and placed into service. Testing should verify device functionality, performance against specifications, system integration, alarm transmission and response, access control operation, CCTV image quality, emergency notification coverage, and backup system activation. Commissioning provides formal confirmation that the completed system meets its defined requirements and is ready for operational use. For CPP professionals, testing and commissioning provide the evidence that the security system is actually performing as designed.
Testing and commissioning provide the evidence that the security system is actually performing as designed.
Installing a security system is not enough. Ongoing testing, maintenance, and measurement are required to ensure that protection remains reliable and effective as conditions change. Security systems can degrade over time because of equipment failure, environmental conditions, changes in operations, or outdated configurations. This means security professionals must continuously verify that the protection capability remains effective. The objective is not simply to install a system and declare success. It is to ensure that the system continues to provide the required level of protection throughout its operational life. Security testing provides practical verification that controls are actually performing their intended functions. Operational testing verifies that day-to-day security operations are functioning as designed. Alarm testing confirms that alarms, transmissions, and response procedures work correctly. Access control testing verifies credential authorization and accurate access logging. Response exercises simulate incidents to determine whether personnel and communication procedures function effectively. Independent evaluation provides an objective assessment without relying solely on internal assumptions. And CCTV performance testing verifies image quality, coverage, recording, and retrieval under operational conditions. For CPP candidates, remember, a control that has never been tested is an assumption, not an assurance. Security systems that are not properly maintained will degrade, fail, and ultimately provide a false sense of security. There are three important categories of maintenance. Predictive maintenance uses monitoring data and performance trends to identify likely failures before they occur. Preventive maintenance involves scheduled, routine maintenance designed to reduce the probability of failure. Corrective maintenance repairs or restore systems after a failure or degradation event. For CPP professionals, maintenance protects availability, reliability, and performance. A security system is effective only when it remains operational when it is needed. Measurement transforms physical security from a cost center into a managed security function. Without meaningful metrics, it is difficult to determine whether security investments are actually reducing risk or simply creating the appearance of security. Operational metrics may include system availability, detection effectiveness, response time performance, alarm rates, false alarm frequency, and maintenance completion rates. Outcome metrics may include incident frequency, detection and response times, overall risk reduction, successful prevention events, and business disruption reduction. For CPP professionals, the key question is the security program actually reducing risk or simply creating the appearance of security? Physical security is not a static program. Threats evolve, technology changes, facilities are modified, and organizational requirements change. A disciplined assurance cycle helps ensure that security remains aligned with current risks. The cycle includes audit programs, test controls, measure metrics, and improve processes. Organizations must also respond to new threats, facility changes, security incidents, and regulatory changes. For CPP professionals, continuous improvement ensures that the physical security program remains effective as the operating environment changes. We now move into the CPP decision-making framework. The CPP examination tests more than knowledge. It tests your ability to apply a structured and analytical approach to physical security problems. Successful decision-making begins with understanding the problem, identifying the relevant risks, evaluating available controls, and selecting an appropriate solution. This structured approach is what separates exam success from simple memorization. As we continue, let's look at the questions that should guide your thinking when solving CPP scenarios. When faced with a physical security problem, apply a structured sequence of questions. First, what is the asset? Clearly identify what needs to be protected. Second, what is the threat? Determine who or what could cause harm. Third, what is the vulnerability? Identify how the threat could exploit an existing weakness. Fourth, what is the consequence? Assess the potential impact of a successful attack. Next, ask what is the current control? Understand what protection already exists. Then ask what is the gap? Identify what protection is missing or inadequate. Finally, determine what is the countermeasure and how its effectiveness will be tested. For CPP candidates, this framework helps turn complex scenarios into a logical sequence of security decisions. There are several common mistakes that candidates should avoid when answering physical security questions. Trap 1. Technology before risk. Choosing a security technology before completing the risk assessment. Trap 2. Single control sufficiency. Assuming one security control is enough to provide complete protection. Trap 3. Selecting the price. Choosing the strongest or most expensive solution automatically, instead of selecting a proportionate response. Trap 4. Install without testing. Assuming that an installed system works without verifying its performance. Trap 5. Detection equals prevention. Confusing the ability to detect an incident with the ability to prevent it. And Trap 6. Protect everything equally. Applying the same level of protection to every asset instead of prioritizing based on criticality and consequence. Understanding these traps can help you avoid common errors on the CPP examination.
Understanding these traps can help you avoid common errors on the CPP examination.
Let's reinforce the first 5 of the 10 golden rules of physical security. Rule 1. Risk before technology. Always understand the risk before selecting a security solution. Rule 2. Protect what matters most. Prioritize protection based on asset criticality and consequence. Rule 3. Use layered protection. Never rely on a single control. Build multiple, complementary layers. Rule 4. Integrate people, process, and technology. All 3 must work together to create effective protection. And Rule 5. Design for failure. Assume controls may fail and provide appropriate backup and redundancy. These principles provide a practical foundation for making sound physical security decisions. Let's continue with the remaining 5 golden rules. Rule 1. Match detection to response. Detection without an appropriate response capability provides limited security value. Rule 2. Consider the entire life cycle. Security must be considered from design and documentation through installation, operation, maintenance, and replacement. Rule 3. Test before acceptance. Never accept a security system without verifying that it meets its defined requirements. Rule 4. Measure effectiveness. Collect meaningful metrics and verify that the security program is actually reducing risk. And finally, Rule 5. Continuously reassess. Threats, assets, vulnerabilities, and business requirements change, so the security program must evolve with them. Together, these 10 rules provide a practical framework for applying risk-based physical security principles in both the CPP examination and professional practice. We now enter the final section of Domain 6, Rapid Revision. This section consolidates the key physical security concepts we have covered into a concise, exam-focused framework. The objective is to help you quickly review the major principles, connect the concepts together, and confirm your understanding before attempting the CPP examination. Let's bring everything together into one complete physical security framework. Physical security can be understood as a continuous framework built around 6 major stages. First, assess by identifying assets, threats, vulnerabilities, and risks. Second, design by establishing security requirements and selecting appropriate controls. Third, protect through measures such as deterrence, detection, delay, and defense. Fourth, implement the selected systems through proper installation, integration, and commissioning. Fifth, test the systems to verify that they perform as required. And finally, improve through audits, assessment, and continuous improvement. For CPP candidates, remember that physical security is a complete life cycle, not a collection of separate activities. Every physical security incident follows a chain, and understanding that chain is fundamental to effective protection. It begins with the threat, followed by the target and the vulnerability that allows the threat to succeed. Security measures then provide detection, followed by assessment, communication, and response. The process continues through resolution, recovery, and lessons learned. Every link matters. A weakness at any point can affect the overall protection capability. For CPP candidates, remember that effective physical security depends on maintaining the entire protection chain rather than optimizing only one stage. A common misconception, and a frequent exam trap, is viewing security as an obstacle to business operations. The CPP perspective is different. Security should protect people first, protect critical assets proportionately, support operational efficiency, enable business continuity, reduce losses and disruption, and support organizational objectives. Security exists to help the organization operate with greater confidence, resilience, and managed risk. Every security decision should therefore be evaluated against its business impact and operational requirements, not simply the security benefit in isolation. Before completing Domain 6, use this checklist to confirm that you understand the major concepts. Review facility surveys, asset identification, threat and vulnerability assessment, risk assessment, gap analysis, the 5Ds, defense in depth, access control, authentication, CCTV, intrusion detection, security lighting, perimeter protection, screening, communications, and power continuity. You should also be comfortable with security design, documentation, procurement, vendor selection, installation, integration, testing, commissioning, maintenance, effectiveness measurement, audit, and continuous improvement. If any of these areas remain unclear, revisit the relevant section before moving to the CPP examination. As we conclude, let's reinforce the CPP mindset for physical security. Start with risk. Never make security decisions without first understanding the risk. Protect in layers. Never rely on a single control. Layered protection provides resilience. Integrate. People, processes, and technology must work together. Design for performance. Define requirements and measure security against them. Implement professionally. Manage scope, schedule, budget, and quality. Test and measure. Never assume a security system works, verify it. And finally, continuously improve. Threats, assets, and vulnerabilities change, so effective physical security must adapt with them. These principles represent the CPP approach to physical security, and applying them consistently is the key to sound security decision-making. Let's bring everything together with a final framework for Domain 6. First is the management cycle. Assess, design, implement, test, monitor, improve. Next is the protection strategy. Deter, detect, deny, delay, defend. And finally, the integration principle. People plus process plus technology. These three frameworks provide a simple way to remember the entire domain, from conducting a security assessment to designing, implementing, testing, and continuously improving an integrated physical security program. Keep these frameworks in mind as you prepare for the CPP examination. Congratulations on completing Domain 6 Physical Security of the ASIS CPP Mastery Series 2026. Throughout this domain, we explored physical security as a complete management process, from risk assessment and facility surveys to protection design, implementation, testing, maintenance, and continuous improvement. More importantly, we learned that effective physical security is not simply about cameras, barriers, locks, or guards. It is about understanding risk, protecting what matters most, creating layered protection, integrating people, processes, and technology, and continuously measuring whether our security measures are actually effective. Remember this simple principle. Security is strongest when every layer has a purpose, every control supports the mission, and every weakness has been considered before the adversary discovers it. Thank you for joining me throughout Domain 6 of Physical Security. I hope the session has strengthened your understanding, improved your CPP examination readiness, and given you a practical framework that you can apply in your professional security career. Keep learning, keep reviewing, and most importantly, keep thinking like a security manager. Thank you, and I look forward to continuing with you in the ASIS CPP Mastery Series 2026.